Scotland, winter transforms the landscape. But it's not just the scenery that changes during the winter. The way that we experience sound is also entirely and distinctly transformed. Before we get into this, I want to prove to you that you can almost definitely hear cold. Let's listen to the familiar sound of running water. I am going to pour the same amount of water from two identical cups into another pair of identical cups. Can you guess which one is cold? Yes, the second is cold. In fact, we are so good at hearing cold, 90.8% of us will get it right. But what are we actually hearing here? It seems that this is actually quite a contentious subject, as I found out when I came across a physics Reddit thread on this. I'll link it below. But there are quite a few theories on this, and I'm going to give you the most straightforward answer. I always think the best way to really understand what's going on with sound is to turn it into a visual. I found a blog by Intelligent Sound Engineer, who I will link in the description below as well, who analysed the frequencies of pouring hot water and pouring cold water by putting it through a spectrogram. Contrary to instinct, it seems that both pours produce the same frequencies or pitches. However, different frequencies are boosted at different parts of the pour dependent on the temperature. So as you can see here, the colder water actually has stronger, higher frequencies at the start and end of the pour, whereas with the hot, the frequencies are boosted in the middle of the pour. The first theory I found is in line with a famous YouTube video by Steve Mould. When water cools, the molecules move around less quickly, making the water more viscous and stickier. Now, this seems a little strange with water, but it's more apparent with liquids like honey, that you can see really do become thicker when cold and thinner when warm. Now, with water, it's a much more subtle difference, one that we can't see with the eye, but we can apparently hear it. The cold water's viscosity means the water forms bigger droplets, which in turn boost the frequencies at the start and end of the pour. Another theory by Robbie Selfridge is that steam from the hot water could have an acoustic filtering effect. However, it isn't just boiling water that changes the sound. I have a theory that we can tell the temperature of water anywhere, even in a stream. Now, I can't find any studies on this, so let's do an experiment. I'm going to play a clip of a cold water stream and a warm tropical stream. Let me know down in the comments which one you think is the cold one, and we'll see if this theory holds true. So, whether you're listening to a boiling cup of tea or if my theory is correct, a winter stream, it seems us humans have a superpower for hearing cold. But it's not just the temperature of water we can hear. On February the 3rd, 1947, Snag Yukon recorded Canada's coldest ever day at minus 62.8 degrees Celsius. It is said that people could hear the hiss of their breath as the moisture turned to ice crystals, the bangs as the expanding ice cracked on the White River, and voices from the airport 6 kilometers away. How could this be so? We are told in school that the speed of sound is 343 meters per second, which is 767 miles per hour. But this is not entirely true. This is assuming that the listener is at 21 degrees Celsius. In truth, the speed of sound is directly affected by the temperature, and the speed of sound increases as the temperature increases. On cold days, sound travels slower, but this doesn't explain why we can hear sound on cold days so acutely. Surely it would die out before it gets to you. Earlier we talked about how water gets more viscous when it gets cold. Well, the same thing happens for air. It gets thicker. The cold air forms a dense mass that sinks down to ground level, and the warm, faster moving air forms a layer on top of this. This weather phenomenon is called temperature inversion. Our coldest day in Snag Yukon was no exception to this rule, with the higher ground being at minus 23.1 degrees Celsius. Still pretty cold, but not minus 62.8. Now here is the fascinating part. Sound waves tend to bend away from the less dense warm air and towards the thicker cold air. This means sound waves coming from a person at the ground bend back towards the ground when it reaches the less dense air. When it reaches the ground, it bounces back up, and so on. If the ground is frozen, it works even better. Just like smooth, hard surfaces like glass reflect light, the smoother and harder a surface, the more it reflects sound. This means the sound waves are essentially focused along the cold air level. This means less of the sound wave is lost and it can travel further. This is compounded because the cold air level is so dense, which means it doesn't move very much and there is no competing sound from the wind. The sound becomes crisp and clear. But cold doesn't always mean we hear sound more clearly. Something different happens when it snows. Our soundscape is completely made over with silence. Some of the quiet after a snowstorm makes sense. People tend to stay at home, there are less cars on the road, and the wildlife have hunkered down in a warm spot. But there is science to this silence as well. Snowflakes are six-sided crystals, beautiful and full of open spaces. These spaces in the structure of the snowflake absorb the sound waves, and the snowfall coats the surfaces of anything that reflects sound, creating that relaxing, silencing effect. But this effect is short-lived. As the snow melts and refreezes, the snowflakes change shape, reducing the spaces and reducing the noise-cancelling effect. And when it turns to ice, the clarity of sound is restored, reflected and amplified again. I found this research fascinating, as it got me thinking how much time we spend relating to our visual world and ignoring the information we take in through our other senses. Here in Scotland, winter transforms our soundscape to a place where you can find both silence and clarity. It seems that when we step outside and listen, you never know what you might find. You might even have a superpower. If you enjoyed this video, then thank our patrons. If it wasn't for the patrons, I wouldn't be able to do these videos. If you'd like to find out a little bit more, please do head over to patreon.com/BethRoars. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye. Down.